It's not my problem. It's not my problem. When I feel heavy metal, and I'm pissed and I'm speedo. When I lie and I'm missing all of the time, but I'm never sure why I need you. Please don't miss out.
Fast turnaround from last night. Welcome to the Prospect Podcast. Coach Schumann. I'm here with Coach D as always, and we have our fantastic guest. I'm not sure if he's in the New Jersey Hall of Fame yet, just because he just retired from New Jersey, but he will be as soon as that is available. Coach Kubik, who just retired from coaching at Madison High School after I think 19 years, I think it was as head coach there. Tremendous career. Now he's in soaking up. Well, not the sun right now, but eventually will be the sun down in South Carolina. But an amazing career, 127 wins, I believe, in his career to only 69 losses. And some of those losses, by the way, was when he was building up the program. So it's really not even an accurate reflection from that. Once he had that program built up, it was like no turning back from that standpoint. So, and there was a run of a few years there where I think it was pretty hard to come by a loss period. I think there was 3 years in a row without a loss. So 2010, 11, and 12, if I'm not mistaken, without a loss at all. So that's probably one of the longest winning streaks in New Jersey's history. I mean, Coach would know this more than me. We'll let him talk about it. But fantastic career, obviously a Hall of Fame career as a head coach. And is smart enough and lucky enough to go retire to the Sun. I'm sure he's going to stay active because anybody that's as successful as he has been is going to find a way to do something. But it's great to have Coach on.
I appreciate being here.
No doubt, Coach. I touched on it a couple of the brief highlights. If you could talk about kind of your time at Madison, your coaching career, and you know what you guys accomplished, is some of the things that you went through throughout that career, building it up and getting to the heights that you brought it to. If you could talk about that part of your career.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've been a coach for 34 years, so I was 15 years as an assistant at a couple schools, kind of rolling into Madison. I'll never forget the day I got the call from Sean Dowling telling me that, you're going to be the guy, and I knew I had my opportunity to build my own program. I've been very lucky working under 4 great head coaches, in my time, with Alex Kaplanovich at Verona, Ed Cumming at Whippany Park, John Quinn at New Brunswick, and before that was Lou Rassiopi at Verona. So I always wanted to be a head coach. It was always my thing. So when I had this shot at Madison, I was pumped. I knew it was a great community. We scrimmaged them a couple times back in the day when I was at Whippany. Verona's actually Verona, and I kid 2 of my assistants because they played for Madison back in 2001. They were freshmen when they won the state championship in '98. But I did tease them that Verona's first playoff win was against Madison. I was the defensive coordinator at Verona at the time, so I had to tease those guys. But it was just a great, great opportunity. But again, when I had the chance to go to Madison, great kids, kids who were ready to work. They were respectful on day one. It was a real talented group my first year, but we only went 4-6. But that was the year we had, we played Del Barton and we lost by 6 points. The next year, we lost by 3. We battled really good teams. So we kind of went through the building stages the first couple of years. And then the third year, we kind of got into a league that was teams our size, the Lenape Valleys and Walk Hills. And, we went to the NJAC. So we played all Group 2s. The only teams our size back in the day was Butler and Pequannock. and that was about it. We're
Yeah, that
playing
was the old
football,
Northern Hills
Northern
Conference
Hills.
Suburban Division.
Yep. So then we started, getting into a little different league and started playing Hanover and, playing some teams our size and and it was fun. So, and then we started getting on a really good run. Year 3, we won our first playoff game, and then we had the run, which was special. That senior class was outstanding, and the classes before them, fit in perfectly. Justin Goodwin is the only player from that class with a high school loss. His freshman year, he was up when we were 8-3. The rest of the team, that freshman class was undefeated. I don't even think they lost in 8th grade. They were just a special group. So they kind of kicked things off for us, as sophomores. And we had a really good senior class in 210 with guys like Matt McHale and Aaron Fant and Mike Stainerd. We had some really good players, and it really started us off on the run. So we won 3 in a row. We had a couple years we were 6-4, 9-2, and battling and played hard. And then we went back to back again, and that was special, because those teams wanted to get back. They knew about the streak team, and they really wanted to make their own name for themselves. And it was a couple years removed from a title, and that was a good foundation for us, to build up some credibility in the program. And it was fun. I mean, let's face it, winning is fun. And, the kids played hard and they were a great group. And then, it kind of carried us through. We had a couple tough years, from 16, to really 21. A couple things, we had some administrative issues and things that made it a little bit tricky for us with practice rules and things. It just, we couldn't practice on certain holidays and things like that. And we were, it was uncomfortable, a period of time, but the kids were awesome, battled, worked hard. COVID hit, didn't help anyone. That was an absolute total nightmare, for football in high school. And, it's high school back to this day. The high schools, the kids are, it's made a change, but the boys kept battling through, and the last few years, we were able to get back into the playoffs and start kind of doing what we do. And it was nice to end with this year's type of run with that senior class. I don't know what I would have done if they were juniors. They were just
right.
I had 18 seniors who I loved.
And 18 seniors at a school your size, right? Like that's a bigger group.
I think only one time I had 21 or 22, and that was around that was a COVID time. We've had a couple big teams. This was one of our biggest in terms of numbers. But those guys, it was nice to see them, kind of, put their mark on Madison football, by making their playoff run. We didn't win a title, but, it's, as all the people are asking me, a lot of reporters would say, well, what happened? You haven't won a title since 16. Well, a lot of people haven't won a title since 16.
A lot of people have never won a title, period.
That's
so, let's relax. Yeah, listen, you know how the media is. That's just,
people are competing. There's a lot of good programs out there. North Jersey football is, pretty tough. And, New Jersey football overall. I mean, we saw the South, go on their run with the playoffs this year as well. It's tough to win, and people don't get that, so when you get an opportunity to win and, you can cash in on it, it is special.
No doubt about it. And it's, I think it's really interesting to hear you say that, because you had so much success. But no coach is immune to different things that can happen. First of all, you're at a public school, so obviously it's not like you can just bring in any group of kids you want. You have a level of what kind of kids are coming into you, and there's the beauty to that, right? When you get some great groups that come up, and you're like, wow, we can really roll with this group. And then, it sometimes things change in different areas too over time. And that changes what type of football players you get come out, or the youth program changes. So it's interesting to hear you say that. I mean, especially someone who's had so much success like you have. And you're right. I mean, COVID was but it finished me off as a head coach. So for quite a while. So I'll put it like that. That was what I was, that yeah. It took me a while to come to that realization, but I was like, yeah, that changed. My eyes opened up a lot in COVID of how people can be. So and the word it was one. I mean, you always as a coach, sometimes you have great administration, sometimes you don't. But you always hear people say it's all about the kids until they're like, hey, you got to play a football game without practicing. I'm like, wait a minute. So is it all about the kids? I mean, even though we happened to win that game, by the way, but it was like oh, it's all about safety. It's all about safety. And then like we haven't played a game without ever practicing for two weeks, But so those things opened my eyes, and I think it opened up a lot of coaches' eyes as to the reality of the world is, and then you move forward from there. But it's really your career is unbelievable. I'd love for you to talk about, because you were assistant for a long time under some great coaches, and if you could talk about, and you started coaching, right? Were you still in college when you started?
Plus, I was a volunteer in college.
Okay. Yeah.
Once I realized I wasn't talented enough to play in college, I took a couple years off, and all of a sudden I ran into my old high school coach, who was Coach Kaplanovich. He was at a Montclair State game. I was going to Montclair State at the time, and that kind of kicked off my career. So I started volunteering while I was a student in college, and then I started getting hired full time for jobs and teaching.
I was fortunate enough to be on staff with Coach Kaplanovich. I coached his son at Don Bosco. He was a receiver for me. Coach Cap was on the other side of the ball. I don't think he got paid. I think he was just there. You know what I mean? Like, but what an experience of being around. You know what I mean? I mean, I've touched on it before. I did 1 year at Don Bosco with Toll as the head coach, and I was on the offensive side of the ball, and with Coach Cap on the other side, and Coach Dan Morangi, who's now at Indian Hills. I mean, just learning from those guys that they'd been in it for so long, and it wasn't even X's and O's, or like Chuck Granatello was on the offensive line. I mean, these guys, just the overall football stuff. So much of the stuff that you don't know, you think you know it because you've played football, but you've never really been or coached at that level. Just the things that would come up, and they're like, oh yeah, like just handle it like this. And because these guys had been head coaches for so long at certain places and gone through it all. It was just such a year. And Coach Cap I still talk to him to this day. I mean, what a dude. His kid was a really good player, ended up going to Union College and playing receiver there and stuff. I mean, just to have those knowledge and to learn from some of those guys, like, unbelievable. So fortunate for you that you got to kind of, that was the tutelage of what it was,
Yeah, I know. I was very lucky, very lucky. And Coach Cap, it was just kind of, I played at Clifton, so I was there 3 years with Coach Heck. And then Coach Cap came in my senior year, which was fortunate for me because he was a Montclair State guy. And I ended stumbling into him later on, which is I always knew I wanted to be a football coach. I knew I'd made my career decision a long time prior. Phys ed teacher, football coach, that was me. And then I saw him sitting in the stands, and I'll never forget it. I'm like, I want to get involved in coaching. What do I do? And he goes, well, I'm up the street of Verona. And at the time I was living in Clifton. He's like, perfect. Come on by 3:00 on Monday. We'll get you started. And they already played a couple games. They actually just beat Mountain Lakes that year. This was 92. That was a really good team. And that kind of kicked it off. For 3 years, I kind of volunteered under one of my old coaches, the assistant coach, Bob Zuka. Great guy, character, awesome linebacker back in the day before I was born, at Clifton. But that started my career. And then, they kind of rolled through from there. Like then I started getting into teaching. And once I graduated from Montclair State, that's when I got hired by Ed Cumming at Whippany Park, which I always tease. I know you had Nick Liberato on
Yep.
the other day. I
Yeah,
actually
Nick was great.
interviewed the same week with John when he took over at Hanover Park, which, and I said, I go, I used to tell Nick, well, your dad didn't want me as a coach. He cast me off. I went to Whippany and away we went, and,
Yes.
and being being a Madison guy, I was very close to, could have been a Hornet, you never
Yeah.
know. It's just
Right.
funny how your life goes in a certain path. But, yeah, so I got hired at Whippany Park, which was 2 awesome years. I was actually started teaching. I was at a little all-girl Catholic school, Lackadair Academy. I was an athletic
Great school.
director.
Great school.
Yeah, it was cool. And then I got hired at Verona full time as a teacher. So I was at Verona teaching and Whippany coaching, which was great. Public school finally got paid a little bit more. It was kind of nice. But then when Coach Zuka retired, there was a position open, and that's when I got hooked back up with Coach Cap. So he actually hired me, and that was huge. I was teaching and coaching in Verona, which was awesome, full time, and I loved it. And then Coach Cap went to Paramus.
Yep.
And I was like, uh-oh, what's going to happen now? And talk about a turning point and getting lucky. There was a baseball coach, who was teaching at Montclair at the time, and that was Lou Rassiopi. He came in, he was looking to, get his staff together. And we didn't have a lot of guys on staff. We only had 2 varsity assistants and 2 freshman coaches. And the freshman coaches kind of did some varsity stuff as well. But he was looking for someone to take over the defense. It was always my dream to be a defensive coordinator. So I'm like, I'll do it, And so I was his defensive coordinator for 4 years. And, I was fortunate to win our first state championship, won the section in 01 with Fasano and Corrado.
Stud.
That team was awesome. Smallest offensive line I think I've ever been a part of, other than Fasano at tight end, and we had one big kid at tackle.
He stood out a little bit.
But it was just a great experience. Lou was awesome. Between Lou and Cap, I learned a lot of defense from them. They were terrific because Coach Cap would just stop practice and go over every position in the middle of team day. He's like, all right, we're not getting this. And all of a sudden, like, I knew as a volunteer what every single guy did. Like, I walked out of that my volunteer time going, all right, I know how to coach defense now. Like, I felt comfortable. Ed Cumming was awesome at offensive line. Like, he was a wing T offensive line coach clinic for me. And I thought that was an awesome time, and, worked with some good guys there. And then after we won the championship, I moved down to Central Jersey. I was in Montgomery. So that's what kind of got me thinking. I didn't want to leave Verona. I love Verona. I was there.
Verona's a great spot. A lot of people don't really understand Verona and Cedar Grove because they're Essex County, right? Verona, Cedar Grove, literally like right next to each other. Small Essex County schools. They kind of get tied in or lost in the sauce a little bit with, your West Oranges of the world or your Newarks of the world because they're Essex County. Like a Glen Ridge too gets thrown in there. West Essex, like those schools are small, but they're always in it. And
Caldwell, all that.
Yeah.
There's some good. There's some
Caldwell. Come on. Oof.
Yeah, I had no interest in leaving Verona, but the commute was just rough. So I was going from Montgomery to Verona, and so I started looking around there, and then I got a call at night. I thought it was a telemarketer. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, who's calling? I started applying for a bunch of jobs down there, and it happened to be Ron Stanridge. And I'm like, okay. And he was building a staff. He just hired John Quinn, and he was putting a group together. And, I interviewed there and, jumped on that staff, which, again, talk about, encyclopedia of football, that like there was 6 or 7 guys who ended up becoming head coaches, off that group. I was a special teams coordinator my first year, and then they moved. Don Sofocanic was the defensive coordinator. They moved him to offense and gave me a chance to be the defensive coordinator there for 4 years. So I was there 5 years with that staff, and that was a great experience too. Like talking about learning a lot of details, like the things I learned from the other guys, I had a chance to kind of add to it, and just how to adjust guys and move linebackers around, and just some different coverage concepts. And 3 of the 4 coaches were wing T guys. So that's where I kind of got my wing T roots. Cap, Cumming, and Quinn. Those guys were wing T guys. Rassiopi would run anything that would put the ball in the end zone. He was a pro I coach by nature. But he'll run whatever he needed to do. So that was a great experience as well. And it was, those four guys have been, tremendous. And I was lucky to be around some great assistant coaches as well. So that, you're sitting in a room with guys who know football or learning football, and it was a fun experience. So I felt when I got the Madison job, I didn't know how my career was going to go, but I felt comfortable, and I felt like,
Right.
I had a basis of what to do, and I just had to put guys around me to help me.
What did when you took over at Madison, what were some of the things that you felt you needed to put in place to get you on the right path and build that program up?
First two things: weight program, assistant coaching staff. That was when, I wanted to hit the ground running. So we started putting, and they had a weight program, and some of the kids were going, some weren't. I kind of talked to some of the kids from that senior class after. It was kind of an interesting scenario. And that was the first thing. So even when I was teaching at New Brunswick, I was running up there 3 days a week, to make sure the guys were in the weight room, and it was on the complete other end of the building from where it is now, and in a little shop area.
They've made you guys have made some tremendous upgrades when it comes to facility wise, whether it be the field and getting turf, or just the weight room itself. And look, Dave went to Saddlebrook High School. I went to Butler High School. So we're in the same world of small, group 1, group 2 football of what it is. And we know, like, for those moves to be made, it's not just a football move. It has to be a school move. It has to be investment by, the higher ups, the administration. And fortunate for you, like, Madison is a sports town. Like, it's an athletic type of town where the community itself really rallies behind any sport in the building, right? It's always been one of the things for when you talk about Madison sports in general, or Madison High School, like the student athlete is really kind of pushed. And we've been at enough places to know that that's not always the case when it comes to it. Administration from the top, that they back it. They understand that sports kind of drive what this building is. You wish more schools were like that, in terms of like really like athletics mattering a lot more, understanding that when it comes to it. It's also a place that's prideful in terms of, like, look, guy that just got hired after you was a former player, right? Like under the Madison guy, like the recycling of guys that either come back to town after they've left to play college ball or stay. There's that pride that always goes into what it is to, like, be a Dodger, and that matters. And I think that's different certain places everywhere you go. You were fortunate enough to be there long enough, right? And to see it go, the ups and the downs of it. But at the same time, always understand that the standard here is that the student athlete's going to matter.
Yeah. And it's, again, and it allowed me to start the process. Like I said, the weight room bounced around a little bit until they found the home and they built the structure. I mean, the weight sat there for a little bit, for some certificates of occupancy and things. It took a little time to get the process going, but once it was there, it was there. So first thing was really building the weight room. Second thing was building the coaching staff. And the one thing about the staff was there was a group of guys who were around. Some were in town, some were kind of here. But then I started getting volunteers from Madison, and the current head coach, Curtis Sally, started off as a volunteer, and he was a guy, ex-player.
Buddy, I had to cover him his senior year. That was a bitch. That was a welcome to varsity football game for me. It was unbelievable.
And he came on at 210 when we won our first title. And then he was that guy who moved from like a volunteer to a leader, and then a position coach, and then a coordinator. Guys like David Snell, and then some other guys who kind of been through, guys like Darnell Evans, Martin Horn, guys who used to play for Madison, coming back. Like, I started getting those guys as volunteers. which was really cool, because like when people complain about, we don't have enough coaches and I'm looking for a coach, I never looked for coaches. As a matter of fact, there were guys who asked
Yeah,
to
you
come
probably
on
had to
staff.
say
I'm
no.
like, I actually did. And there's some guys who ended up being head coaches. I just didn't have spots. I didn't want guys standing around because there was nothing, there was one time I had like a group 5, I had like 15 assistants, it was like,
It's a lot of polos.
Yeah. So I've been very fortunate that I built the staff from guys who, there were a couple of guys around, Kevin Carroll, who was a longtime coach. He wanted to coach freshmen and, he was really important. And then, kind of building my guys around a little bit, and some people were in town and some people were, volunteers. And I've been very lucky with my coaching staff. One of the guys who was on for a long time was a great guy, and he passed away a few years ago, was Vito Lapino. And Vito was like the energy of Madison football. He was the junior football guy, and I needed a coach, and, I stole him from junior football. He was kind of, doing a little bit of double dipping and doing both. And then he was on my staff, and he, talk about a Madison guy being on the staff. And, it was nice. Like, you have that type of energy and people like that. And, it goes a long way, so, I've been very fortunate. So those were the two things building the program: weight program, assistant coaching staff. The X's and O's are what they are. You can run a million different offenses and 100 different defenses. I mean, I ran what I ran for many, many years. I was a zero coverage, 7-8 man front guy, and do something about it. And I had 1 or 2 front calls and 1 coverage call, and we checked a couple things. And I was as simple as defense was. Play fast, play physical. And then the last few years we expanded a little bit. And that's where having Curtis Sally and Nick Liberato, those guys became my co-D coordinators. And you got to be someone special if I was going to give up being the defensive coordinator to guys like that. And then Curtis was my defensive coordinator this past year, and he really took that leap of being the guy. And it was fun. It was, I was very lucky. So I was able to build a great coaching staff. And when guys left, there was someone else,
Right.
And that's where, I think I made some good hiring choices over my years. And I think that was the one thing, I kind of learned the type of guys, that I wanted around me. And I was fortunate that they were there.
Right. And that's always kind of one of the tough things about being a public school coach, right? And especially at a smaller school, right? Like, it's not for monetary gain, because you're not getting a very, if you get a stipend, good for you. Like, but we still expect you to do everything that you're supposed to and be here and put all the hours, all of those kind of things, and just numbers wise in general, when it comes to staffs, like it's hard to find assistant coaches now that aren't teachers in the building. And, certain schools have like, hey, if he's in the building, he gets the nod first. And, even if he's not, like, hey, he's a guidance counselor, but hey, make him the freshman guy or whatever. Some of those things like are really kind of detrimental to a staff, especially when you're trying to establish it and kind of bring it to a certain standard and continue it to be and keep it there. Right. When it comes to coach, the youth program and that organization, of how pivotal that is, especially at a place like Madison, where some of those guys or families have the means to go elsewhere in terms of financially to, say a Del Barton or any type of parochial or private school. There's a couple of things that I think Madison always has in their corner for why that doesn't happen more than it does. Is one, the academics of the school itself are phenomenal, right? So parents are okay sending their kid to Madison High School. You still got to get educated in a certain type of way. That's a huge pull, right? The second is that financial means of like they could go elsewhere, but no, they're going to stay home. What's that relationship like, or how did you form that relationship with the youth program in Madison to kind of keep those guys home and have that relationship where, look, you go to a Madison football game, like those youth players are at the game. Their parents are bringing them to the game. Like those guys want to be involved in that atmosphere. How did you kind of form that relationship and kind of, set the groundwork for that moving forward?
The first guy I talked to was Vito Lupino, and he was the head of the junior football at the time. I remember Vito was coach. He used to be the head coach of Bailey Ellard when I was at Whippany. He was
what a flashback. Bailey Ellard, nice. Like that was wow. If they would have ever stayed to kept it, holy shit, they had some wild team. They ended right around my senior year. Wow, what a place. Yeah, holy hell. Like that's a flashback.
Vito was the guy, was the center point in the beginning. I went over, I gave him a playbook, offense, defense, talked about everything, and he tried to get the guys down there to do that. Now, it's not always easy to do, guys have grown up kind of, and Coach Monica ran some different stuff back in the day, a little veer and things like that, So there were some Monica guys down there, which, and I've learned the X's and O's are what they are. But Vito tried to get them to run, and they started running more wing tee-ish stuff, and they called it their own way and things like that. But that started the process. We kind of have some clinics and just to show them things, and that was really the process that started. And then when Vito became full-time on my staff, he kind of bridged that gap and kind of kept me involved with those guys. So that's where it started. We did change leadership a few times for junior football. So, you tried your best to be down there. And we did lose some guys. I mean, let's face it, there are some guys. The one thing I've learned, there's people out there with a lot of money to kill, and they have no problem sending their, kids somewhere else just because it seems like the thing to do. So, because the kids who, no offense, go to some of the other schools like Del Barton or Lawrenceville Prep or things like that, they're going to the same college that their older brother may have went to, who went to Madison. Yep. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. So, we didn't always win those battles with the, losing guys to, we've lost some pretty talented guys to, some of the parochials. It is what it is, but we kept enough guys home, where it mattered. And those were the guys who wanted to be here. But, just trying to be involved. We kind of kicked things up again with junior football, almost a rebirth of, because again, COVID kind of made things weird and different leadership and administrative stuff. But we had an opportunity to get back with the junior program. I know Joe DeMarzo, who is the 8th grade coach the last couple of years. We kind of hooked up a little bit more and had some meetings, and we changed our offense a little bit, a little spreadish, but at the end of the day, it was wing tee and power offense, and we still ran the ball. But we were able to go over stuff with them. Some of my assistants kind of volunteered down there and helped out. Guys like Ralph Sandello was down there volunteering, and Nick Liberato and Curtis Sally, and those guys were bouncing around down there too. So we always had a presence. And then some of my ex-players, which shows how long I've been there, were old enough that they're now coaching there, and that's where it got cool, where, okay, those were guys from the program from 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now in 2020s, they're back. In coaching. So that's where that bridge always kind of, stayed. It started with Vito, kind of rolled through a little bit, trying to, just have communication with those guys. And then as kids from the program started becoming the adults and started coaching, you keep the tie.
It's very interesting to hear how you build the structure in the community, which is really became the linchpin of all your success. Talk about when you went on that like magical 3-year, I guess it's really almost 4-year, because the first team was 8-3, right? But and I don't know what was the team after you guys when they actually finally lost. That team was 7-4. So it's not like there was really a huge drop off. But like, talk about that run there and what what did you do right that captured it, and what were some of the things that really were catalysts, between the players, the community, and yourself, for making that happen?
I think the big thing is we really didn't talk about it as it was happening. You just kind of stayed in the moment. It was funny. The first year, like, we were 8-3 the year before. We lost the Summit, in the semifinals, and we played Milburn on Thanksgiving, and we were having a rough first half against Milburn, which, kind of, the people on the coaching staff are aware of how halftime went, which we kind of had a little bit of fun with that. A couple of pieces of Milburn equipment didn't last the halftime, and then we came out and won that game. But
sometimes you got to make that statement. Sometimes
it was just one of those moments. A young coach, had some fun. But we just started the next year, and I just remember we had a good team. We knew we had some players. And we just started winning games, but we grinded out a lot of games. We were kind of winning, and it was under the radar. And before you knew it, we're 5-0, and then when I thought there was something really special going on. Again, we won some tough games. We played Lenape that year, and we were both undefeated at the time. We were 5-0; they were 6-0. They beat us the year before, first time we ever played them. They beat us 21-7. It might as well have been 50-0. It just felt like a beating. They were just physical. They grinded it out. And here's the big matchup: Madison, versus Lenape Valley, and we won 42-0. And I was like, oh boy, this team is different. And I was really like, okay, we got something going here. Let's keep this rolling, and let's see how far we can actually take this. And it was amazing. Like, the playoff run was special, and as we went through, and I think the only time I was nervous was the semifinals, like, because all of a sudden that hit me. Like, got a shot to go to the championship game. And it was a big deal. We played Rutherford, who was really good that year. They were tough. And we were losing at one point in a battle, and I had all these cool things on defense, and none of them worked. And I had to refocus, and like, they're running the ball, not throwing it, and they had stud receivers, and all of a sudden the quarterback can run. And we got through that game. And once we got through that game, I'll never forget going in the state championship game against Caldwell, how relaxed I was. Like, we're in the championship game. This is gravy now. Like, I've already won a few as an assistant. Let's have fun. One of my assistants was nervous because he had this, he was doing a throwback special, like, he's a special teams coordinator, Steve Hughes. He wanted to throw it across the field, behind lateral, like across, and try and catch him. And he was nervous. It wasn't going to work at the last minute. And I'm like, what are you nervous for? You act like, well, this is a big game. And I just remember being relaxed. And then after winning that game, I think just being relaxed in the big moments kept everyone else kind of relaxed. I just kind of felt the bigger the game, for some reason, I just felt comfortable in it. I was more nervous week one. How good are we going to be? I don't know how good we're going to be. Just that anxiety of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But then as the season went along, we won the first title in 2010. It's like, okay, we got one. We got some credibility. We have our thing. Let's just keep rolling. We knew we had that sophomore class that were a bunch of studs. We knew their senior year they'd be special, and it was, we had a very small senior class the next year. And it was like, can we keep these guys on track? Now, it was a small senior class, but they were studs. They were awesome. Right. The Finelli cousins, Ben Anderson. We had tough, hard-nosed kids. There was like 7 or 8 of them. And it was always like, if we can win that second, then we know we can win. We have a shot at this thing. And that was the most dominant team I ever coached. The 11 team. Like, those guys, we had one close game, I think, all year, and that was Lenape Valley. Every game was, pretty much rolling through. And once we kind of capped that off, that was the Summit game, in the state finals, where the boys just, played out of their minds. And some of that's motivation too. I mean, you always want to play hard, but let's face it, Summit's a great program. They're awesome. John Liberato is first class, coach. But we kept hearing so much about Summit that the boys were like, Coach, we're not even playing them, and they're talking about Summit. I'm like, well, that's what people think, and that's how it is. So too bad. Do something about it. It was kind of that thing. So we had a little chip on our shoulder that game and that whole playoff run, and worked out for us. And then the next year was.
I wish I was on the phone with you in 2011, because the next year Summit smacked me in the state championship in 2012. In 2012, when you guys won in 2012, and we lost to them in Group 3. I guess they moved up.
Yeah, they
right?
moved up to
They
3.
moved up to
We
Group
stayed
3,
at 2
yeah.
because that would have been a cool rematch. We were because both teams had everyone back.
Yeah.
So that was a junior dominated game. Which would have been fun again. I'm sure the outcome would have been a lot closer and a lot tough. And but the boys, and that's also football too. You just get on a roll. And sometimes it just happens. And it's not a knock on the team you're playing. I've been on the other end of that too, taking a beating. I just couldn't stop. And it's just a credit to, the other team. And sometimes it's just not your day. But those guys were tough, and, we were motivated, and it was kind of a, and that was a fun scenario for us, that kind, you're defending champs and you're an underdog.
Right.
Which is like, okay, and it shows you what, how great that Summit team was, people didn't think we had a shot at all, and they earned that. And the next year, you had to deal with that. They were good.
They're good.
They were great. And then we got to the next level of having to play again. And, the next year at 10 o'clock in the morning, we're playing Mountain Lakes, for a three-peat.
Yeah.
Talk about a great job they did. I mean, it was 13-0, and, both of our big plays were passes. We had to run like rocket pass with Goodwin, throwing to another receiver. And, we had to get a little creative because, Mountain Lakes tried to do what I tried to do to people: pack the box, play zero coverage man, and do something about it. And it was hard, so you kind of learned some lessons that day, and, sometimes might be a little more multiple, but, that was kind of the run, that we went through. But the key was staying in the moment, not making a big deal about it. We didn't talk about the streak until we broke the streak. Everyone kept talking about the 38 game winning streak that, Coach Monica set, and not discussed. We did not talk about it, and everyone wanted to talk about it on the outside, but it's a football game, and the one thing I always try and talk about the kids is, you focus in the season, and then at the end of the season, you count your wins and you can look back and you can enjoy those moments. That's when you go back and, but in the moment, like, hey, we got to win this game so we can win the next one. You start looking ahead, you start tripping over things that are in front of you that you don't see.
No, it's a great point. I mean, it's amazing, amazing ride in those 3 years. I mean, 3 straight state championships, undefeated seasons too, not just state championships, but undefeated seasons. Is that the biggest winning streak in New Jersey history? Or
no, not even close.
What is? I'm curious. You must have looked at some point. You must have.
Well, no, I knew it's Paulsboro.
Oh, Paulsboro. What did they win at one time?
They're somewhere in the 70s.
Really?
Oh yeah. Paulsboro was like in the 70s.
Group 1 power, yeah.
Wayne Hills is somewhere in the 50s.
Well, yeah, they had a big one.
St. Joe's, Montvale, I believe, went on a huge run. Randolph was a bigger streak, I think. They had the one tie, but I still think they had more wins. So I'm not sure where we fall, but we're definitely out of the top 5. We are not in the top 5. I can think of, I just forgot them at the time, but I would, when we were going
you're
through
right.
Paulsboro had
is a huge streak.
63.
Wayne Hills had 55 from 04 to 09.
Yep.
Asbury Park had like 46 wins back in the mid 70s. Montclair had like 47 wins in a row. Yeah, I mean, look,
there's some teams
winning a game just in general is incredible. But to do it consistently, right, like over and over and over with no losses is something that I don't think people really understand, and how much, especially I couldn't imagine nowadays with social media, of how much more outside noise is so readily available and easy for these guys to get caught up in. I mean, back when things were in newspapers, right, like maybe you really didn't have it, like understand it on the level that it is, but a streak is a streak irregardless. And it's more about the people outside the locker room talking about it, and how do you keep like, for the most part, like if your culture is built a certain way, those guys aren't concerned with that. They're going out and, hey, we're going to win the next game. That's all that matters, right? And it's game, and that's it. Like the overall bigger picture is more for the parents and the outside people, of like people that don't understand what we're trying to do here. So I think that's like a credit to the culture.
And you're number
right?
4 all time, coach. You don't give yourself enough credit. Number 4, 37, I think it was, right? 37 in a row. 39 is number 4. Yep, number
There you
4.
go.
Is it really?
Yep.
Okay.
Florence
I thought I was at a
40.
top 5. I felt like there was someone. All right, I'll take it.
Yeah, Paulsboro, Wayne Hills was 55, what Derek said. Florence was 43, and then you guys with 39.
Okay.
It's a hell of an accomplishment.
That's a heck of an accomplishment. There you go.
Got to put that on my resume for
You got to put that on your resume right away,
Yeah.
Coach. That goes right on there. I was curious because it is a lot of wins in a row, and it's so. I love how you talked about like staying in the moment, right? Like keeping them focused on the next week and staying in the moment on everything, because that way the players don't feel and not just the players, probably your assistants. You know what I mean? You seem like your Iceman, where it doesn't phase you, but to keep those guys, the assistants and the players, like not thinking about it. You know what I mean? It is really I think it's obviously you're rolling and there's a lot of games where you just crush teams, because you're better than them. But in the closer games, some of the closer games, that's when it probably would normally creep into a player's head. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to be the group that lost the streak. And obviously all streaks end at some point, but it's really cool how you were able to maintain that focus, which keeps them all calm and keeps them on the right path. 19 years at one place as a head coach, in today's era is a pretty long time. It really is a long time. If we go back to like when you were in high school, when I was in high school, obviously there was coaches that was the norm a lot of times where coaches would be around for a long time. And you said you played at Clifton for Dennis Heck?
Yeah. Which ironically, I was the reverse of it. My era of playing at Clifton, there's a new coach every 2 to 3 years.
Right, because I remember that, because with Dennis
how
left
they
to go
did
to
it.
what? Teaneck, right? He went to Teaneck from there.
He went to Teaneck. Yeah, he actually got let go. I remember being in the board meeting upset about
Right.
what's going on. We even had a little mini protest outside the school. Like Clifton at that time did not get it. They did not get it. And that was a shame.
That was the shift in Clifton too, right? When you were in high school, that was when Clifton was just like they were the biggest powerhouse forever. You guys were still really good, but it was like I think
my senior year we struggled just again because it was the breaking point.
Right.
They let coaches go who were 15-4 in 2 years, and like guys like John Lishak and even Jack Jones got out of there, and
right.
Just like it was just an interesting time. Coach Heck was there for 3 years and was solid.
Right.
He was 7-2 my junior year. We lost to Patterson Kennedy, who won a state championship with Devon McDonald, and and lost to Eastside, who was really good, and just it was that kind of era. But I mean, when they were really successful, they had coaches that were there for 20 years, and that's when there was an era of leaving coaches to coach, and when I was in high school, it was just after the Monica ending in Madison. Like, I knew who Coach Monica was. I was
Right.
aware of him. I didn't, meet him until I got the job. But yes, it was nice to see that there were programs out there that left coaches, and
Yep.
Madison was one of them.
Exactly. And what do you think that did for you with your program as far as like a community that obviously you had some early success, meaning in like the first 5 years you had some really good success, which obviously helped continue to keep you around, no doubt. But talk about how like that created that stability, how it affected the community, how it affected programs. Because I think, in today's world, like I think they don't value it the way that, like, when people are like, oh, I want to build a program, then all of a sudden they turn over coaches, and then they want to build a program and then they turn over coaches again. Like, I don't think, a lot of the modern administrators understand that, like, you do have to give coaches a little bit of time to be able to do their program. Yes, I guess if they're 5 years down the road, right, and it's not working, I understand that. But talk about what that was able to do for you with your program.
Well, I think it was just helpful having that ability to. Well, the longer I stayed, the more comfortable I was also making decisions and being able to deal with things. I didn't get a lot of parents giving me a hard time, which is great. In 19 years, there's a couple. It's going to happen. But I did have a lot of support, and that was a real helpful thing. But it also allowed me to run the program the way I wanted to run the program. Like,
not to cut you off, I was going to ask you that, Coach. Like, did you feel pressure from the outside, being, as a traditional place, right? I guess that like there's roots, right? And people, certain already expectations and standards of what Madison football is, you coming in there, like, was there outside pressure in those first couple years of
not,
like, hey, you might want to do this or hire this person, or was there any of that? Because look, I always go back to my alma mater, where stability is like, I mean, there's just nothing but stability, right? Like, I mean, the guy that's the head coach now has been on staff there since 1994, right? Like, I mean, you're talking like, this is not much change or happens about that. Madison for a while was that, and then kind of had a couple where it was like a different guy or somebody else to get back to that. Now you come in and now you're 19 years. Like, that's incredible. I just, I want you to continue, but I just was curious if there was a lot of any pressure from the outside as to kind of how to do things, especially being a younger head coach at the time. Everybody always wants to put their 2 cents in. Dave's talked about it a bunch when he took over his alma mater at Saddlebrook, where he was really, really young, right? And it was kind of like, eye-opening of like, oh, well, I want to do it this way, or just any of that type of thing.
I think the thing that helped me, well, it was funny. I still have the letter in my garage from Coach Monica when I got hired. And the biggest piece of advice he wrote in the letter is, you know more football than anyone who's going to come to you and tell you what to do. You do what you believe in. And I actually followed that my whole career.
That's great. That's great.
And if you're going to ask anyone to take advice from in Madison, it's Coach Monica. When you say coach in Madison, I'm looking for coach. I know he passed, but he's the coach of football in Madison. And I took that to heart. I also been around guys where I felt I knew what was going on. So, and I really took that advice, and if there was outside noise, I didn't really listen to people other than staff. And I've had that discussion with people outside the staff. No offense. I'm not, you're not part of the brain trust with what we're doing. This is what we do, and that was the one thing. The longer I was there, I was a young coach, but not that young. I was an assistant for 15 years. I was 36 years old. I was younger than the parents, but, I wasn't a 20-year-old guy, which could be, a little bit of a tough scenario.
Right. How old were you, Dave? Dave, you were 20 something, right?
No, when I got head coach first time,
your first gig at
30. I was 30. I wasn't that. It seemed like I was younger because I was in business before I.
Right. Yeah. Because coaching was your second kind of
for 2 years. So, as a coach, but like, mine was different because I came in with like I came in because I played Division I football, you know what I mean, and I came in as an assistant for 2 years, and there was a weird situation that was going on. Like we had built a powerhouse when I was an assistant, and that program was really good. And then there was like a falling out between. I was a lower guy, you know what I mean. I was like a position coach, but there was a falling out among the coordinators with the head coach. Even though we had won like 1,000,000 games at that time, like we're going like 10-1, and but we didn't get over the hump. We didn't win a championship, and that was kind of what started to happen, and I always thought it was crazy. But then I went to Riverdale for a year with DJ Nymphius, which was just a great experience. He made me a coordinator, and then I came back as a head coach. But I came in. I don't think I don't think I took the job knowing what I needed to know, even though I just thought I knew my hometown. I was from there, but I had been away, you know what I mean? I went to college. I was an assistant for 2 years. I really didn't know. I'd been away, and I worked in business for a few years. But I really didn't know so it was by the way, it was great. It ended up being a great experience. I had some great players. And I was only there 2 years. It ended up helping me for when I took over at Powell Park because I went back to Nymphius, won a state championship, and they took over Powell Park. I knew what to do round 2 to build up a program from scratch because that was kind of what was required at Saddlebrook because of what had happened with the falling out, and they went on a couple of tough years, but then it so I knew what to do round 2, you know what I mean? But first round, I thought I knew what to do, and I was expecting a different scenario as far as support, as far as administratively, which shocked me. You know what I mean? That's why I always say, like, sometimes going back to your old school could be great. Could be great. You know, if you're in the right situation, it could be great. Sometimes they view you still as the great athlete from your hallways. So
Right.
That was how I thought, because my father was a track coach there, is a legendary coach there in track, and was there for 9,000 years. He's still at 84.
Still doing it at 80-something years.
There. He just went back last year after he retired from coaching. He went and coached girls after he retired from teaching. Coached girls for 20 years and went back. He's 85 years old, going to be 85. So he went back there. But, you know, he was the legendary coach. So I was the athlete that came from there. And I always thought that if I knew that going in, I probably would have taken a head coaching job somewhere else first before I came and coached there, because I would have known more what to do. But ultimately, I thought it helped me, right? It helped me to become, because I became a head coach so young, it helped me the next place. I knew what to do round 2. I knew what to do. And I knew what to do to build it, and it ended up working out great. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny you talk about, like, you really weren't that young. Like, it was funny when I got the job, even at 30, I was like, people were like, "Oh, you're so young." I was like, you know, I was 30 years old. Like, it wasn't like I was just right out of college. Like you know, I already had been living on my own for quite a long time. So, but anyway, sorry. You know, go ahead and talk more about it. One thing I thought was interesting, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, was learning how to handle parents that were obviously older than you. I thought was my first challenge in round 1. Round 2, I knew what to do. Round 1, I didn't realize that they would view me as a younger person, because you were in an authority role, right? And so I was like, I was always like so surprised how they would talk about, like, "Oh, well, I remember when you played this, and I remember so-and-so, I coached you in youth football." I was like, "Oh my God, that's right. One of these people coached me in youth football, and now they have kids." You know what I mean? So talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, that phase was interesting, and that's where it helped me having guys like Vito Lupino and Marty Horn, guys who lived in Madison,
Right.
on my staff. They became almost the buffers. Not intended, but like people would go to him, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And then they would come to me, and I'd be like, "All right, well, tell them this." You know, so like I kind of had a chance to they almost sent the message out of, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And they were one of them. You know, they kind of bridged that gap. You know, so you had guys in the community and guys on the coaching staff and I think that helped a little bit with credibility while this guy from Clifton, who we don't know anything about, is running the program of something we love. So I think that kind of helped out. And then again, winning the championship, obviously,
Obviously.
it didn't hurt, and the process. And then as that was going on and we were starting to have some success, even when we struggled a little bit, now I'm older,
Right.
and now I'm the same age as the parents, and now I'm leaving and I'm older than the parents. It was easier to have those conversations with them because they, while they may not always agree with you, they at least respected who you are,
Correct.
from that, like, all right, he's the guy in charge. I may want my kid to do more of this, but that's and I used to, and I would just always back it up with, this is why and this is how. I didn't discuss playing time, but I did discuss how I make decisions,
Right.
and and because I don't discuss specific kids, because then you got to talk about another kid, which I'll never do to a parent.
Right.
So it just kind of worked out. My timeline worked out. Like I said, I had great assistants, and I also had the volunteers, the young guys. So most of the community understood the message of the program from within. Like I had guys in the community, and then when they walked into the coaching room, we're coaches. This is what we're doing. Here we go. So I had that help, that way. I think that was a good experience for me, as opposed to just bringing in, 5 or 6 guys, had nothing to do with Madison. It just helped that my staff is kind of built from, guys who were in the communities. A couple guys weren't, it was kind of a good mix. And that's what started early on. And to be honest, and no disrespect to anyone, I really didn't care. Like
Right.
like I did, but I didn't. I want everyone to agree with everything I say, but I know that's not realistic. I get it. So at the end of the day, I have to make a decision. Even if guys on the coaching staff, I
Correct.
did get 51% of all votes, and that's just how it's got to
That's
be.
how it is no matter what. Yep.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. There's times I'm looking for input, and there's times I'm not. I got it.
Right.
And that's just how it is. And it doesn't hurt working under the guys I worked under, because that's where, again, I was 36, not the youngest guy on the planet, not old, but I felt comfortable. And,
Right.
I 4 different guys who knew how to coach football, and there were common themes, that they did, and how they ran things and how they acted and how they talked to parents and how they were, that I felt was right. And when you feel you're right, you do things with confidence. And when you do things with confidence, a lot of people, whether they agree or disagree, they respect it, and then they move on.
I think that's a really, really important point, that as a head coach, and for both head people who are going to be head coaches, and for assistants working under head coaches, to understand, like, the head coach is going, sometimes will go and ask for input to see if there's some ideas that he may not have thought of, and he may not use any of the things that you input. And it's not really about, it's nothing against that assistant. It's the head coach sometimes has something in mind, wants to see if there's something out there that might be better, then goes and says, okay, what I was thinking of doing might be the best move. And I also say too, like, to assistants, like, sometimes I go and I draw up a bunch of things, and it seems like it's going to be awesome. I put it into practice, and I realize that was not awesome, and I'm tossing that right out immediately. And sometimes assistants are dumbfounded by that. And I'm like, well, this, some of it's tried and true, and some of it is experimental, right? So there's tried and true things that, maybe with blocking schemes and stuff, that, especially with the wing tee, right? That, these are rules that are going to apply almost all the time. But there are also some scheme things that, you want to experiment with to catch somebody off guard, all those kind of things. And the other thing, from a head coaching standpoint, I think you're right. Like, having the confidence just to make that decision, and trust what trust what and not get caught up in what others will think about it, because there are people, and sometimes it could be an assistant coach. And obviously if an assistant coach is too long doing that, he's not going to be with you very long. But it's not your job to make sure everybody's in agreement on to everything. It's your job to make sure everybody goes out and executes what the plans are. And but it doesn't mean that everybody has to agree wholeheartedly on it. And I think that's really some really valuable stuff, because head coaches, a lot of time, because there are a lot of younger guys that get into head coaching now and that take over programs much more so than like when you were in your 30s. That's really not that young. Like when I took over, like I didn't know anybody that was, my age at the time doing it. So I really had to rely on older people to help me with that process. But I think there's a lot more young guys that end up getting jobs for a variety of different reasons. And those are important things to understand. But it's also important to always take that input too, right? Because you never know what someone else's idea is. And sometimes a guy has an idea like that's like, oh, wow, like I didn't think of that. Like that's really, really great. And that's an important thing for coaches to be able to have. But I think you put it really well, because that whole process, like, kids can put younger coaches can pull up videos on anything, right? Like you can pull up a video of Nick Saban in the war room yelling at his staff, you know what I mean? And then you can pull up somebody who's having this collaborative, beautiful environment where they're all conversating, right? And they're all like, which one is right? And it's like, well, you have to know who you are, right? And do the process as the head coach that helps you to make the best decisions that you can make. I'm sorry, Coach.
Also not to cut you off. I'm kind of glad you kind of rolled into it with, if there are guys who also do have a good idea, and when they do, you got to roll with that too. This can't be like, I'm 51% of the vote. Too bad. Like, again, I turned over a defense to Curtis Alley and Nick Liberato because I trusted them. They were sound. They did not run the exact same defense I did. Madison defense looked very different in those few years, and even my last year as D coordinator, I was taking input from those guys, because let's face it too, football changed a little bit offensively. Right. Back in the day, we're stopping wing T, we're stopping pro I, we're stopping running teams. The occasional Butler influence team would be out there, and you would deal with them, when you needed to deal with them. You had the one spread team on your schedule, and you had 9-10 other teams that are going to try and smash the ball down your face. So my defense fit perfectly into that mold. And there's times to turn it over to guys that, do different things that, that are outside the box, and even offensively, we kind of played with a few things. But so the key is, you got to set the program the way you need to. And when I was the D coordinator, this is how we're doing it. When those guys, when I felt, they were ready to do it. And they were ready longer before they were named it. But, it was just it was hard for me to give that up. That was a big deal for me, which showed you how much I respected those two guys. But, letting your coaches coach as well. Like I never called an offensive play. I may have said, hey, this is a good set here, and I like this. And, my philosophy has certainly been out there. But Marty Horn has called the offense, for 18 of the 19 years. And Steve Hughes is the special teams coordinator, and he's, for 17 of the 19 years. So those guys have done their jobs, and they have an opportunity to coach just under the framework of the philosophy set down from the top, and that's just kind of how it is. So, to recognize great assistant coaching ideas as well. And some of that influenced some of the things I did, down the road. So, like I said, 51% of the vote, yes, in tough decisions, but at times too, you got to let your guys coach, especially if you trust them, and if you do, you got to let them work.
No doubt about it. I think it takes the load off of you too, allows you to like step back, when they're on offense and special teams, and be able to see what's going on, talk to some, although in Mass, you probably had a lot of guys going both ways, probably still, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys were you two platoon, or
No,
were you?
no.
Oh,
Every single year, I think since New Brunswick days, I
okay.
have drawn up a 2 platoon in my head. Now, I wasn't the head coach of New Brunswick, so that didn't. At Madison, there was several teams I actually almost had it. Like I had like 9 or 10 guys one way, but just one. But when you get to crunch time, and it's like, it's just hard to take certain guys off the field,
Yes.
and to actually, go through that. So yeah, we ended up, usually have a good core of guys. And some teams, some years it was less, sometimes you may have, 5 or 6 guys one way, and
Right.
that's awesome, or guys rotating, and that
Right.
was the one thing we tried to do. Like, we may
Depth.
not be 2 platoon, but a lot of guys are getting on the field, and that, it's the same field.
No doubt. The time and a half for guys, like where they were full time here and part time here. Like there was a lot of value to those guys as well because of packaging and stuff. And I think that's the beauty how things have evolved. As far as football wise, where more and more guys are able to package, which can get more players on the field. And a guy has a specific skill set, but maybe doesn't have all the skill sets. You could get them on for certain things, and they could be really valuable. For certain things. I remember, I remember back in the day, DJ used to run. There's a kid, his job was just to run a hitch, and he would throw him hitches, and that's all he would throw him. He's like, you catch hitches, like that's what you do, and he would run him on for the hitches. The kid had great hands, but he wasn't super fast or anything, and he'd catch those damn hitches over and over again. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. I'm curious, because you talked about it, obviously, since you're a wing T guy, as wing T started to evolve, from the time you started, guys went to gun wing T and, every which way imagine, but obviously maintain the wing T blocking scheme as the principle of it all. Did you kind of start to do any of that stuff? Did you start to evolve? I was curious or did you stay like tried and true wing T?
No, I definitely did some gun stuff,
Okay.
and the primary reason was the biggest thing I liked in my, Marty Horn, offensive coordinator as well. We loved the running quarterback, and we thought that was huge, because now you're not just defending the fullback and 2 halfbacks. Now you got 4 backs, and that's a problem. So that's where, it didn't always look like wing T. We'd get into some gun sets and, it'd be trips with a tight end or, and it could be some slot sets where the quarterback is out of, he's in the gun. But we definitely tried to get the quarterback involved in some of our best teams. I mean, this past year, we just happened to have a running quarterback who can throw the ball all over the place, which was awesome. But some years, like back in the day, our goal was we take a running back who can throw, and that's what I would prefer. So we did get to some gun stuff. Now we were fortunate that we had guys like Matt McHale, who, in 2010, who was a great quarterback, who just happened to be a big physical kid who can run, and Carson Lassiter and guys like that, and Mike Carney, like guys who can do both. They can actually do that, but we like to be in the gun, just the threat of running the quarterback, and we always thought that was an important thing to be able to do. So early on, we were kind of under center wing T, but that kind of changed, as soon as possible, because I knew as a D coordinator, it's hard to stop a running quarterback. It's an extra guy. You got me outnumbered. That's why, I ran the defense the way I did. So we weren't traditional wing T, but and we took 21, 29 sweep out.
Right.
That became the one play that we felt we were coaching it so much and not using it enough. So that became power. We, instead of running sweep, we ran power.
Right.
That was our bread and butter. We still ran rocket and jet and trap and counters, and we did our thing that way. But we kind of got out of some of the old school mode. If you saw us the first couple of years, we were, right, left, tight right, tight left. We played the part, but we moved out of that, 2 or 3 seasons in.
That's a great point. Listen, at the college level, and even some of the NFL teams, although they're mostly more zone-ish, but the college teams, when Gus Malzahn took over at Arkansas, then Auburn, right? Was running. He's running the wing tee from the gun. I mean, that's what he was running when Cam Newton was quarterback, and they were just happened to run a lot of power for the Q. But I mean, he took that whole blocking scheme and implement and it spread, throughout college. That even though people are in spread looks, quote unquote, they're still running that pin and pull blocking scheme and utilizing a lot of the wing tee principles to do it, especially from a rule standpoint, which makes things really, a lot more effective for a lot of these lines, especially in tight spaces. You know what I mean? It makes it very effective for them to be able to get downhill and for backs to be able to get downhill, which in the modern RPO game kind of gives them a lot of advantages because of the look that ends up happening. As a linebacker, like you just can't just sit there. You know what I mean? You got to get on your horse and get moving as guys are pulling, right? So, and then all of a sudden you throw right off of that and that guy's completely wrong no matter what he does.
Yes.
Type of situation. So it's interesting because I think the wing tee, a lot of the RPO stuff, because I just seen Dunn, at Old Japan do it. So like when I stopped coaching, I coached with them as an assistant in 2016, and then been like up until this year was like their analyst for 3 years, breaking down everything, like would give them all the reports and everything. And one of the nice things about it was like you would just see like he was implementing the RPOs off of that full wing tee blocking scheme and love power. He loved power. And they were running those RPOs off, and it was it became so effective. I mean, they're incredibly good, and they became so effective off of it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, especially being a linebacker guy. And when Nick Libb went to Hanover, I got a chance to get back to the linebackers, which was kind of nice for me as opposed to sitting there staring at the defensive practice. I kind of finally got a role again, but we had to deal with like playing Sparta. Those guys are moving guys around, and
Coach
I teach
has
my
done a good
linebackers
job for a long time.
This is the first time ever in my career, like when a guard is pulling, my guy's zone dropping, because those guys are just slinging it out there, and we like had a, it does put you in conflict because you almost had to, you got to get the kind of the feel of the team. Some teams run RPOs to run the ball.
Right.
Those guys are running they're throwing the ball, and you got to know which one you're dealing with, and you got to adjust accordingly. It's just interesting, and that's again why, sometimes you got to let some other guys get in the mix and defending that stuff. Like Curtis Sally loves that, dealing with that stuff and, kind of changing our defense. But yeah, the RPO, like, just the whole evolution of football, and what people are doing and, in terms of that, with the blocking scheme. But yeah, if you can run the ball, then that stuff's even more dangerous, just slinging it out there a little bit.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So what's next for you, Coach? I mean, kind of to cap it all up. Now that you're retired, are you going to coach again? What are you thinking about?
I hope so. And so my goal is, to be honest with you, I retired from New Jersey because you can't afford to retire in New Jersey.
Sure.
So my goal is to come down here and do what I want to teach. I want to coach. I don't want to be a head coach. I'd prefer not to be. It was my 19 years has been a long time. I just like to be part of a staff, and a phys ed staff and a football staff, and that's really what I want to do down here. So that's why I'm subbing, and that's why I'm trying to get in the schools and, reach out. I ran into a head coach the other day at one of my sub jobs, and I've thrown my resume out there. So my goal is to, continue coaching and teaching. I'm old enough that I can retire, but I'm young enough that I can't sit in the house. Plus, my wife does not like that concept. She loves when I'm going out subbing and working. I don't need to be around all day. I don't golf, so I got to keep busy. There's only so much I can do home. So that's my goal. My goal is to teach. My goal is to hopefully become an assistant coach. I'll take a position. I don't care. I don't need to be a coordinator. I'll do whatever you need me to do to be on a staff. So that's really my goal.
No doubt. I think that sounds like a great plan, an enjoyable phase too. You know what I mean? To everything you've done. You're a phenomenal coach. Of great respect for what you obviously did as a coach for a long time and as a head coach, and what you did at Madison. And I remember when you guys were on that role and just absolutely dominating. And it was just it's great to finally talk you, meet you, and get into the mind a little bit of someone who had such great success. You say it so casually, but like I said, like it's not just the amount of wins, but like just even the run, like the run that you had. It's like I was always fascinated by I think it was in the late 50s, early 60s when Oklahoma had a phenomenal coach. He won like 47. I think he won like 47 in a row or something like that. And I was always fascinated, like reading stuff up about how not just the fact that he won it, but how he was able to continue winning without losing for such a long time period. Because I always thought that it's not just about going undefeated for a season or two, but the duration of being able to carry that for a long period of time is an incredible skill set that not many people can actually do, because there's so many things that can happen along the way. And it's an amazing. I know, and I know you undersell it, but I mean, I think if you had your resume out enough times, if I'm your resume advisor, I put right on the top that win streak right there, and I think it'll take all but 3 seconds for any guy to go. Although this guys in the South can be tough, I do know that, having been around the because I ran all those showcases all those years when I would go to Texas, and the guys would always tease me like, "What does the guy from Jersey know about football?" And guys from Florida would say the same thing. What does the guy from Jersey know about football? But they will we'll see what you have, and I'm sure it'll be a fantastic phase 2. So I can't thank you enough for coming on today, Coach.
I appreciate you guys having me. This was awesome. I was talking with you guys and talking some football.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it, man. Enjoy your time.
Have a great day. Have a great day, Coach. All right.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye. Fantastic stuff, dude. Like really, like truly a what he did there is phenomenal. Like it was always like Coach LaMonica, he was Coach Monica was there for like 28 years. So
he was there forever.
From the 50s, literally to like I think the early 80s, maybe.
Yep.
And so but then there was different iterations of guys for a while until Chris came in.
Stabilized it and then got it back like where it was. And it was always a rival for us, like whether it was on our way to a state championship or regular season. I mean, there's a lot of years where they faced each other twice because they would play regular season and then Butler would play them again in the playoffs. And if it wasn't, back when there was only 4 teams, if it wasn't the semifinal game, it was the finals that Butler was playing Madison for a state title. Right. And it's gone back and forth years. They'd win some, we'd win some. Like it just really was. So I've always had great respect for the town itself and the school itself. And, to see Coach go there and have such longevity, you're talking 19 years at a place that, with that tradition, where there's a lot of expectation and a certain standard that it is to come in as a guy not from Madison to kind of, ride that and go with it. And then you're talking a streak on top of it, like at a group 2 school, where again, public school, where you get what you get and you just got to you ride that wave to win that many games in a row, 4th all time in the state of New Jersey. I mean, it's just incredible. It's an incredible feat. to one, be there for 19 years, but to also win that many games and state titles and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, you didn't really see that wave that you see at smaller schools where you're good, you're bad, you're good, you're bad. That consistent winning at that level with you get what you get. It's just a credit to what he did as a coach. And then to get out and still want to do it, right? Like, hey, I'm in a new place right now. Like, now we talked about that a little bit before you got like off air a little bit. Like, what's your next move? And do you want to coach? Are you just going to kick back and kind of hang out? And like, no, I want to coach again. It doesn't have to be a head job. Doesn't have to be a coordinator job. Like, I just want to get in a building and kind of do it. So anybody down there that, you know, looks at it and takes coach on, like, man, that's just a bonus for them because they're getting somebody that's still got a lot of juice in it. And we see a lot of those guys that do that and then get rejuvenized, right? Because it's something new, it's something fresh. And,
break.
Yeah, a little of this, you know, and you know, right into it. So it'll be awesome to see kind of where he goes from there.
No doubt about it. Really great guest. You know, I had to do the math to figure. I was like, oh yeah, he must have started coaching in when he was in college because
numbers wise,
there's no way he's that old. You know what I mean? So like I was like, there's no way he's like 60. So
yeah, no, hell no.
You know, and
still got the juice.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And but yeah, great stuff.
We're back tomorrow morning with RJ Cobbs, DB coach from Del Martin.
Oh yeah, that'll be cool.
Does a lot of work with. He does a lot of FBU stuff too.
Yeah.
So,
yep, no doubt about it. He does. I think he does their like 12U or 14U or something like that team or something for FBU.
Amazing school. So we'll see.
No doubt about it. I look forward to it. All right, man. We'll see you tomorrow.
Enjoy the cold.
Oh, when I went and got coffee this morning, I was like, I just came in and said, Florida.
Yes. Although Coach is dealing with 30-degree weather in South Carolina, but we could go a little further. That's fine.
No, I mean, is this how it's always?
Well, it's not. I'll tell you what, it ain't getting any warmer in the next week. You know, it's supposed to be. I don't think it's supposed to be above 30 for the next, couple days.
I don't know what
none of this snow's going anywhere. I'll tell you that much.
I don't know what we're gonna do about our next tryout because of that. So,
yeah,
I moved the flag
Sunday,
league,
right?
I moved the flag league back to the end of February, the kind of winter, and now I guess almost early spring flag league. But I moved that back 4 weeks. Not that it's anything huge, not a huge league or anything, but like just because I'm like, there's no way all this snow is getting off the ground.
No way, dude. I mean, look, it's not supposed to be.
It may not get off the ground till the beginning of February.
It's not supposed to be above 32 degrees until next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's great. So
love New Jersey. Love Jersey.
Yeah.
Amen, buddy.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Enjoy it.
And listen, sorry about Shannon.
Oh, Coach Holdley, bro. Yeah, rest in peace. It's brutal. Like, long time shore conference assistant coach, and it's just really brutal, man. Like, you just never know. Like, went to sleep, never woke up. And he's got one daughter who I believe she's in the nursing program at Salve. I believe she plays softball. He's got another younger daughter who's either a sophomore or a junior at SJV, volleyball player, like softball girl, like brutal. So he's leaving behind 2 girls and a wife. Mid-50s, man. You just never know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you tomorrow for Mr. RJ.
Sounds good, buddy.
All right, man.
All right, later.